happy to welcome our next presenter, who will be joining us from Operations and Quality Systems Improvement Experts. OQSIE is an execution-based management and technical consulting firm focused on real-time management, decision-making, and problem-solving. These real-time management decisions help improve productivity in manufacturing, warehouse, distribution centers, laboratories, and quality systems, deploying real-time alerts while performance deviates. Joining us from OQSI is their partner who will be speaking on the topic, leveraging technology and artificial intelligence to accelerate improvements in effectiveness and productivity in supply chain. Please welcome to the stage with a warm applause, Jaime Velez.
Thank you. Awesome, appreciate it. All right. So I'm going to tell you a story, a case study of one of our clients and a soup to nuts situation that we help this particular client resolve. And we'll talk about how we approached that particular problem and challenge that they were facing. And some of the early technology that we developed to help our client that we're now showcasing in our booth. If you get the opportunity to stop by, we'll tell you a lot more about it and show you what it is that we've evolved that technology. But we'll talk about the origins of some of that work. Before I get going, let me give you the 30-second version of what we do and how we help clients. So we're a technical management consulting company, focus in life sciences, and we focus in manufacturing, supply chain, quality systems, and late-stage product development topics with clients. We have a technology solutions business, and we also have a workforce solutions business where we help with staffing needs for our clients. Today we're going to focus our discussion around the technology solutions and the connectivity with our management consulting support activities. And again, we're going to do that as we talk about a particular example and case study. So the client and the situation, as you can read on the slide here, it's a medical device client, multiple sites, a complex and challenging manufacturing infrastructure. At the start of this particular project, they're experiencing what I call a relatively similar challenge that many of our manufacturing businesses face. A lot of demand variability at the SKU level. In their case, they had a significant amount of lead time variability. They had a lot of batch rejects that would occur at times that were not predictable. So this is a manufacturing system that was not very mature, yet they had a very high portion of the market at that time. So as we began, we had a business that was on the verge of becoming unprofitable. And for a medical device business with relatively good margins, that was a very difficult pill to swallow for that particular organization. Service levels were not good. Returns were not good. Basically, the general performance was not very good. And the management team was feeling a lot of pressure to resolve the issues that were leading to this disappointing performance, to say the least. After about 12 months of support, and we continued another 6 or 8 months beyond that. But after that 12 months of activity, we basically had the opportunity to say, we've turned this around. We had the financial performance was now meeting expectations. They recovered the market share that they had lost. Their customers were now able to to feel comfortable that they were going to receive the products that they ordered, that they're going to get the service and the support that they needed. So let's talk about how we went from, again, a very challenging, very difficult operational situation to about 12 months later, a situation where that company was very satisfied and was very happy with that group. We took 3, and I call them evolutionary steps, because they actually built on each other. We started with the understanding the demand and supply variability of that particular organization and group of products. So we started with basic understanding of their demand patterns, right? Customer orders, how they came in, what was predictable and what was unpredictable about those particular situations. And we discovered a few interesting things, as you see captured here. A couple of them revolved around when the demand peaks occurred, all associated with promotions, quarter-end promotions, year-end promotions. How many, just show of hands real quick, how many of you work through the challenges of year-end promotions or quarter-end promotions in your business? Just show of hands. Relatively common in our industry. Very common and very clear situation for this particular client as we mapped out their demand. What we also uncovered as we dove deeply into their demand was that it was actually relatively predictable. Right? When we extracted the impacts of those promotional periods, we saw that the mix of their demand and the actual timing of demand was actually relatively consistent, and they only saw variability in the first quarter of every year. And whatever happened in that first quarter would have an effect for the rest of the year, but demand for the other 3 quarters of the year was relatively predictable, as was the mix of product that was being required by customers and ordered by customers. So when we stepped back and looked at that situation, we concluded that we could actually forecast the capacity that was going to be required with a very small amount of information from the sales and marketing groups. So we're able to transition away from a forecast by SKU mode of operation and transition to a forecast at much higher aggregation levels. Product families, and in a few cases, we were able to put multiple product families together and only have the sales and marketing groups share and commit to one high-level number, which was actually a welcome change for that organization. Once we understood the demand patterns and the demand variability, we looked at how was their supply, how were their production activities connecting to their demand. And as you see it captured here on the charts, we saw a pretty drastic disconnect, both at the volume level, right, total production, and at the mix level. So we have, again, an organization that's struggling to support its customers. Service levels are not very good. When we mapped out how was their supply, how were their production activities matching the demand that they were receiving, we saw pretty significant disconnects. So one of the steps that we took was to transition to a demand-driven scheduling system. Right? Pull systems for those that are familiar with the Lean Six Sigma mode of operation. So we implemented very quickly a scheduling system where the assembly activities would be driven and would be defined based on the demand that was received in the previous day, and the mix of demand that was received in the previous day. And we pulled products and pulled subassemblies into the assembly area based on the consumption that was occurring in that assembly operation. So we got to understand how to connect the production activities with the demand. And then our next step was to understand what was driving supply variability. Right? In the first stage of the process, we understood what was driving demand variability. The next question was, what's driving supply variability? What's creating the unpredictability that they were seeing in the movement of product through their manufacturing process? When we first looked at it, we saw significant variability on the production process. But more interestingly, we saw larger variability on the QA release process. Right? So we conducted the analysis in multiple different ways, landed on this view to make it meaningful and actionable. As we looked at groups of SKUs for the various families of products, it was very common for us to find this type of profile, where within a family of products, we would have a group of SKUs that had extended lead times. Right? The cycles were much longer than for the rest of the SKUs in that particular family of products. And part of the effort initially was to understand what was driving that variability for those SKUs, and the lessons that we learned were applied then to the rest of the families of products and for the rest of the SKUs in that particular family. So we're frequently able to have an impact, significant impact, on the overall predictability on when product was going to work its way through the manufacturing system by targeting those particular outliers, as we saw. Once we got to the point that we had a manufacturing system that was relatively predictable, the next question that we fielded from the management team revolved around how do we anticipate problems? How do we keep our hands on the pulse of what's happening in our manufacturing system? That's where we developed the early stages of the supply chain dashboard that we're now demonstrating and looking at in our booth if you get the opportunity. The early stages of this view revolved around understanding and leveraging what we learned about the drivers of variability in the manufacturing process and in the QA release process, and the impacts that variability had on the release of product, right, on the movement of product through the manufacturing process and into the distribution centers. So for example, when we recognized that a product that took longer in the early stages of manufacturing and the implications and the historical performance would translate, that early delay that we saw in manufacturing would translate into a significant delay in the overall movement and release of that batch. We were able to identify where in the process we needed to monitor to anticipate a batch that was going to be delayed in that process. Right, so if we saw a delay early in the manufacturing activities, we knew that without management intervention, that batch was going to be delayed, right? And it was going to create a product availability challenge. Recognizing that up front allowed that management team to intervene. So that's where the alert and escalation process began to materialize. because we were now able to alert the management team when a batch was beginning to get delayed and gave them the opportunity to intervene early on and expedite that batch through the system to prevent the impact that that would have in product availability. In conjunction with the predictive supply chain view that we developed, then we also developed real-time dashboards. Right? So when we talk about dashboards with our clients, we often hear the benefits, obviously, of having dashboards and the challenge of them always being retrospective. Right? We're always looking at performance that occurred anywhere from a week ago to a month ago to a quarter ago as you move up in the organization. And often the question from our clients is, if it's taking me 3 weeks or a month to see that something went wrong, if I had the opportunity to intervene when that particular situation was materializing, we wouldn't be looking at this problem now. So by leveraging real-time information and feeding dashboards with real-time information, we enable the organization, and again, the management team, to understand situations that were going to impact their performance as that was occurring. Right? As that situation was materializing, their action was triggered. Right? They would receive a signal that would alert them to that particular situation, which would have a potential effect in their performance and enable them to participate in the process and intervene in the process of solving that particular issue that was materializing. We connected the dashboard and the supply chain predictive dashboard to a prioritization and scheduling system. Right? Since we're able to understand what's happening at the market level, right, the demand side of the equation, we're also able to understand the implications of any issues that are materializing in the manufacturing process. We're also able then to prioritize the work that was going through the system. Right? Imagine the number of investigations that your quality organization and your manufacturing organization are working through. The ability to prioritize which one needed more attention today was very valuable and very helpful to this client. As we started with the dashboard process, because the one question that we always fielded from our clients revolved around how do I find out, how do I not miss something that's happening? How can you help me make sure that I know, and there's no way that I can miss that particular signal? I don't have the ability to look at a dashboard all day long, right? That's not feasible. So we evolved into, again, an escalation and an alert process, which is what you see captured here, where we began to send text messages and to send email messages at the preference of the particular executive that ensure that any impacting events that they needed to be aware of as part of the analytics and as part of the active supply chain view of their business, that they would know. And not only they would know that that issue was occurring, they would also know that their organization, right, their team, was also aware. So the question that as we began to implement the escalation and the alert process, the question that we encouraged our executive team to to ask their teams was a relatively simple one. Right? I know that we have a situation, and I know that you're working on it. How can I help? Relatively simple question that actually removed all of the early obstacles and all the perceived and anticipated obstacles as we were implementing the alert system. The HR organization was concerned that the management team was going to use the alert process as a mechanism to apply pressure, right, to potentially apply pressure improperly in the organization. What we, again, very quickly saw is that the ability to ask that relatively simple question, right, and recognize and ask the question with that specific intent, right, recognizing that their people knew the issue was present, they were working on it, and the reason they were getting that alert at the management level is because the team that was assigned to work with the issue was struggling, right? There was something that was getting in the way. And management was being alerted because it required management intervention. Something different needed to occur. Right? So asking the team that was working on the issue, how can I help, was actually the right question. Right? And it became a very proactive organization, a very productive and proactive mechanism for management intervention in the right way and at the right time. One of the things that we evolved with them was the triggering systems, right? And the rules, and when would I hear, and when would I know, and what would I know. And as you might imagine, this was a process that took a bit of calibration. Some of the management team members wanted to know everything that was going on. Others wanted to know only when it was an extreme emergency. So we worked with each organization to make sure that their alerts were calibrated to their tolerance, right? And this was really an individual tailoring process that we worked through to make sure that the process was effective and it was helpful for the management team. Here are a few examples of some of the messages that, in this case, this was the quality organization and the head of quality or the management team were seeing. Right? Very targeted, very specific, with enough information for that particular individual that was receiving the message to get relatively up to speed on what was going on and to quickly understand, why am I getting this message? Right? And what action should I take? After a relatively short maturity process, we got to the point that we were getting the escalation process was working relatively well and very effectively. Right. So as we circle back with that management team to understand what did we learn, right? What was different about what we expected versus what we saw. Fundamental lesson, which I suspect is a challenge for all of us, is there's a lot of metrics, there's a lot of data that floats around in our organizations. And it becomes harder and harder over time to make something out of all that information that's flowing into our view. Focusing the movement of information became the critical factor. Right? What really changed their ability to perform was that targeted movement of information to that management team. We also had a series of surprises, right? At the beginning of the process, we had our concerns and challenges and expectations of what would be easy to do and what would be difficult. And we saw a lot of surprises in the process. Right? Behavior changes, both at the organization level and at the management level. Surprise really on both sides of the process. We expected short-term behavior changes that would revert back. We expected bad behavior. And we found very quickly we were able to transition to the right behavior set, right? The behavior set that they expected their organization to have, and the management team, the behavior set that they wanted to hold each other accountable for. It was easier, cheaper, faster than anyone expected that we would be able to implement this in that particular organization when it comes down to it. And when we map out the rate of progress, right, and the movement of performance, we saw a very significant turning point once we implemented the alert and the escalation process. That was the accelerator for that particular management team. It's what they go back to as sort of the turning point for their performance. All right, so let me open it up for questions. Thank you very much.
So where are all the sources of this data? We're trying to do the same thing. We have some of the same thing kind of homegrown, and we're pulling from EMS, we're pulling from different sources. In this example, where was all this data originating from?
So it was coming from a combination of their formal systems, as I call them, so their ERP system, TrackWise, which is their QMS system. And we also had combinations and pockets of data that resided in spreadsheets. Some had resided in databases that particular functional groups were maintaining because they didn't trust the formal systems data, the accuracy, or the timeliness of their formal systems. So as we mapped out where the information was and what information we needed to have the type of response time that particular situation required, then we identified where those sources of information and data resided, and then we just connected, so to speak, almost literally connected to those data sets to extract the information and the data that we needed for the analytics.
Good, thank you. Any other questions? If not, thank you so much. Great job.
Thank you.